بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. ما شاء الله, ما شاء الله. Alaikum salam. How are you, Kamal? I'm joined also by the two Adams. Alhamdulillah, I'm blessed to have you guys here joining us. What's up, Adam? Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, we'll wait like a minute and then inshallah we'll get started bi'idhnillah. MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Some beautiful people are joining. Got the Miftah hoodie. Gotta represent, you know what I'm saying? MashaAllah, this is like one of the most comfortable hoodies I've ever owned, honestly. Ameen. Muhammad Sulaiman, are you looking in the mirror when you're making that dua? Okay, bismillah, let's get started. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair, everybody, for coming. So inshallah, today we're talking about a pivotal point in the seerah. And the only thing that makes me sad about today's topic is that I can't really give it justice. There's so many things that happen, so many like tragic stories that happen, and of course I'm talking about what? The Hijrah. Right? There's so many people struggled in the Hijrah. And before I talk about the Prophet ﷺ and what he did, like I just want everybody to imagine having to do that, right? Imagine having to like leave your whole village behind, you know, the people you grew up with, the people you lived with. It's so hard. It was not easy at all for the Sahaba, and for some Sahaba, it like not just that, you know, emotional difficulty was there, but on top of that was the difficulty, were like compounded difficulties, right? That people gave them a hard time. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. I cannot stop reading the chat. MashaAllah, there's too much taking my attention. But bismillah, let's I'll try to stay focused for the sake of the topic. So many Sahaba sacrificed a lot, right? You have the family of Salama and Abu Salama, right? Who are completely split apart. That whole family on their way to do Hijrah, right? The wife is imprisoned with her family. The child is taken with the husband's family. And the husband, the Prophet ﷺ tells him, you need to go to Medina because people from Mecca are hunting you down. So you have that family, the family of Abu Salama and Salama, that is completely broken apart, right? And Salama, she says, I just want to talk about this a little bit. Salama, she says that she cried every single day. She grieved every day, right? And it said that this went on for a year. That Abu Salama, he went to Quba and he waited for Salama for a year for her to come join him. And one of the things I want to point out about the story is, one, like the struggle that they went through for the sake of their deen, and two, the idea that and this is a kind of a common topic in the seerah that you see repeated, and I think we've mentioned it before, that somebody being sad or crying or being upset about a problem that they have, even chronically, does not mean that there's a weakness in their faith, right? We see with Salama that she's so sad, and rightfully so, right? She split up, her whole family split up. Her husband's in one place, she's in another place, her child's in another place, and that sadness is, we see here, justified in the deen. A person doesn't have to be ashamed or think that their iman is not strong enough because they're sad or they're worried, right? And there are many stories in the Hijrah that we see that people really struggled, right? You have Suhaib al-Rumi, right, who stopped before he's able to go forward, and he tells the people who stopped him that, listen, if you let me go to Hijrah, I will give you all of my wealth. I'll tell you where I'm stashing all my wealth. I'll give you all of it. Just let me go. And they let him go, and he gives up all of his wealth, right, just for him to be able to do the Hijrah. And so now we get to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ was the last person, or the last, I guess, people of the last people to do the Hijrah from the last groups. that everybody was going and going and going, and the Prophet ﷺ was waiting for Jibreel to come and tell him, now is the time to do Hijrah. And suddenly one night, Jibreel comes to him and says, Ya Rasulullah, you need to leave tonight, like right now. Because the plot of the disbelievers, they were coming to assassinate him that night. So Jibreel tells him, right now, you gotta go. And so the Prophet ﷺ gets Ali and he tells Ali, he says, listen, I need 3 things from you. Shout out to Ali Sulaiman. I need 3 things from you. He said, number 1, I need you to stay behind and tie up some loose ends in Mecca. So like, I owe this person, give them back their money. This person, held their money or the property for me, give it back to that person. So tie up loose ends in Mecca for me. He said, number 2, and this is the big one that we know. He said, number 2, I need you to wait in my bed while I go with Abu Bakr. And this is something that's so scary because Ali knows that he's literally waiting in his bed for assassins to come and kill him. Right? Literally waiting for assassins to come and kill him. Imagine you're in that bed, right? Imagine you're the one sitting there and you know that literally there's 40 people sitting outside of that house ready to kill you. And the Prophet ﷺ tells him the 3rd thing that I need, and Ali, of course, he accepts right away. MashaAllah, from his bravery, right? Radiallahu anhu. Karamallahu wajhu. He said the third thing I need from you is I need you to meet me in Medina. And so when people asked Ali later, like, weren't you? It must have been so scary for you to be sitting in that bed waiting, just to be killed. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ali radiallahu anhu, he responds. He says, I slept. I never had a better sleep than that night. I slept so sound in that night because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told me to meet me in Medina, or I'll see you in Medina. Right? The Prophet ﷺ told me, I'll see you in Medina. وَقَوْلُهُ قَوْلُ الْحَقِّ. And anything he says sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the truth. So Ali radiallahu anhu, just from the Prophet ﷺ indirectly saying that you're gonna, we're gonna see each other in Medina, Ali said, I have 100%, I have no concern, right? I'm 100% calm and collected, and I'm not worried about this at all. And yes, Ahmed, Shaitan did come to Quraysh with that idea, right? With the suggestion of killing the Prophet ﷺ with all the different young members of the tribes, right? And it was said there were 40 people outside of the house waiting to kill him. And so the Prophet ﷺ goes to Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr, they talk. Abu Bakr knows what's going on, and he's immediately excited. Why? Because Abu Bakr was waiting for the moment to do the Hijrah with the Prophet ﷺ. He could not wait to be the Prophet ﷺ's companion on the Hijrah. And Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he mentioned that one of the biggest things that he's jealous of Abu Bakr, and I'm kind of paraphrasing this right now, is that suhbah that Abu Bakr had with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the Hijrah, that he went with him together. And so what they did was, let's say, I wish I had some a whiteboard or something, but let's say here's Mecca and here's Medina up north. So we have Mecca here and Medina up here. So from Mecca, they actually went south first. They went south to Ghar Thawr, right? The cave of Thawr. And they went south. They were planning to stay there for 3 days to throw off the trail. And what's really interesting here is that they had a guide. And let me I always forget his name. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Well, they told their guide, who was a non-Muslim, to wait for them in a different location for those 3 days, right? They told their guide, wait for us, we're going to stay in this cave for 3 days, and we're going to meet you in that location. And so, as they get to Ghar Thawr, they go south, and Abu Bakr's son covers their tracks with his sheep, right? And so they go south, their tracks are being covered, they get to the mountain, and Abu Bakr actually carries the Prophet ﷺ on his back, right? And you have to think about the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr. At this point, we're 13 years after revelation, right? So the Prophet ﷺ is 53, Abu Bakr is 2 years younger, so he's 51. So this is a 51-year-old man, right? Carrying the Prophet ﷺ on his back up this mountain, and I haven't been able to experience it myself, but I've been told, and you can kind of see from pictures, that it's not an easy climb up that mountain. And so they climb up there together, and they enter into the cave. And at this point, people are frantically searching for the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr. They're frantically searching for the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr, and the offer on their head is 100 camels, dead or alive. 100 camels, dead or alive. And eventually, the search party comes up to the cave, to the point where it said that they could see their feet. Like the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr could see the feet of the search party, and they only needed to look down to be able to see and expose the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr. Like, it was so easy for them to be able to see them. And so Abu Bakr he's sweating, he's worried, he's stressed. And the Prophet ﷺ says to him, مَا ظَنَّكَ بِإِثْنَيْنِ اللَّهُ ثَالِثَهُمَا. What do you think of two people who Allah is their third? And he says the famous statement that it's recorded in the Quran, لَا تَحْزَنْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَنَا. Do not be afraid, indeed Allah is with us. And subhanAllah, we see immediately after this, what happens is that the search party is not aware of their presence. They're not able to see it. And some narrations in the seerah says that that spider and the bird came in front of the cave, right? But it's held that like I think the stronger stance is that they just weren't able to see them, right? And so subhanAllah, when the Prophet ﷺ is saying this, when he's saying these words, لا تحزن إن الله معنا, they're not just to comfort the Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, but the Prophet ﷺ, of course, has full faith when he's saying these words. He has no doubt in his mind. And what you see here from the Hijrah is that the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr, they took every precaution possible, right? He had Ali stay in his bed, and he had the son of Abu Bakr cover the tracks, and they went south first, and they went into this cave, and they did all of these things to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, Ya Allah, we're doing our part. Ya Allah, we're putting in the effort, right? It's not that the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr, they just went, you know what, we're just gonna, kick open the gates of Mecca, we're gonna leave in front of everybody. No, they showed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we're going to take our precautions, and Ya Allah, ultimately, we rely on you. And so the story of the Hijrah teaches us two important lessons. That number one, we need to always be taking our precautions, right? That anything that we're trying to achieve, especially when it comes to the work of deen, it's not enough just to say, okay, like tawakkaltu ala Allah. That tawakkul is an amazing quality to have, but we're taught from the Prophet ﷺ that tawakkul wa'aqilha, right? أو كما قال, I think I'm quoting the hadith incorrectly. But where he tells the person that rely on Allah, but tie your camel, right? That you do both parts. And that's what we're taught by the Prophet ﷺ, that you take your own precautions, but ultimately, who is going to save you? It's not the precautions that you took. What saves you is the assistance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What will help you in the end is the assistance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because even the precautions that you took, who gave you the ability to do those precautions? It was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what it comes down to. And when we're doing work of deen, or we're doing work even in our schoolwork or for our jobs, it's so important to have both mentalities, right? The difference between hustle culture and barakah culture, right? The difference between working so hard and working yourself to death, but you're not making dua for those same things that you're working so hard for. And if you truly cared about the things that you're working so hard for, you would be raising your hands at night and making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to assist you. Because why? Because your success ultimately comes from Him Jalla wa Ala. That's the bottom, whatever you're trying to do in your life. Right? And also understanding this concept of La tahzan inna Allah ma'ana. Right? That no matter what plot the disbelievers come up with, no matter what the disbelievers try to do, no matter what the enemies of Islam or your own or the people who are trying to harm you try to do, that you understand that that Allah is with me. I have nothing to fear. I have nothing to be worried about. That Allah has got my back. Allah is with me, and Allah is going to protect me, and Allah is going to to be the one who saves me, right? And there's no greater protector than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And understanding that and internalizing that is one of the key things that helps us have a sense of safety and security in this life. I was talking to some brothers the other night, and subhanAllah, we were talking about how blessed we are to have Islam. And what I mean by that, like in particular, is, there's so much, like, wallah, what is this dunya? There's so much difficulty and stress and fear and worry. Now imagine you didn't have a faith-based structure to understand that by, right? Like imagine you didn't have a faith-based structure to understand why do people go through hardships, right? To understand why am I struggling right now? To understand that there is an akhirah, that the al-zalimin, like the oppressors, are going to get their justice, right? That those who do harm to others are going to get their justice in the hereafter. That all of my struggle is going to be rewarded in the hereafter. That Allah sees every minuscule ounce of struggle. That when I feel like nobody sees me, when I feel like nobody sees my struggle, understanding that Allah sees it, right? And understanding too, that when Allah is with me, I have nothing to fear. That alhamdulillah for this faith, that I can find some kind of comfort in, some kind of relief in. And even I just kind of thinking about my own life, it's really hard to imagine, it's really hard to go through difficulties and not have faith there as a reference. It's really, really difficult, because I don't understand how somebody would make sense of it, right? Like, how do you make sense of a random calamity that strikes you, right? How do you make sense of, like, you just have a really bad week, like you get fired, you get in a car accident, etc., etc. You can't make sense of that without faith, without belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't be patient and be like, I'm being good because I'm being patient. What's your reference? That for us, for our faith, we know that if I'm being patient, then Allah is rewarding me, then I'm passing this test, right? And so alhamdulillah for the blessing of Islam, that we can refer to verses like this, La tahzan inna Allah ma'ana, that do not grieve, do not be afraid, Allah is with us, and we can find comfort in that, we can find strength in that. In yansurukum Allah fala ghaliba lakum, that if Allah is going to help you, then none can defeat you, subhanallah. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba internalized. And how long have I been going for? Okay, the last thing that I'll say is kind of a funny story from the time of Umar ibn Khattab, kind of going back to the idea of like taking the means, right? We see that from the Hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ, that they took all the means available at their hands, right? They took all the means, even getting the assistance of their guide, who was a non-Muslim, whose name, I don't know why, I can't find in my notes, I saw it earlier. I believe one of the brothers said his name was Abdullah, and I think that's correct. But subhanAllah, I just can't find it in my notes. Abdullah ibn Zurayqid. Okay, there we go. And he was a non-Muslim, but he was a guide. So they took all the means available to them. And being a person who's just kind of like, I'm just gonna be super humble person. I'm not gonna, get a lot of money. I'm not gonna take all the means. We find that that's not really how the Sahaba lived, radiallahu anhum, right? That there was a group from Yemen who came, and they came to Medina in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu, and they had like nothing on them, right? They were completely broke, and they came like with nothing with them, and they're like, we call ourselves al-mutawakkilun, right? We call ourselves the ones who are relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Umar ibn al-Khattab, he tells them, you're not mutawakkilun, you're mutawakkilun, right? Mutawakkilun means to like have trust in Allah. Mutawakkilun means like you're like a dependent on somebody else, like you're like a freeloader, right? Like you can't do anything yourself because you haven't prepared yourself. And the idea is that you make all the preparations yourself, and you rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what we see with the Sahaba is that they used the dunya as a tool, right? They kept the dunya in their hand and not in their heart. And so they used the dunya as this tool, as a means to support the deen, right? That we see the Prophet ﷺ and even like Abu Bakr, that they lived in poverty, and Umar radiallahu anhu, they lived in poverty, they lived hungry, right? That they were tying stones to their stomach, and the Prophet ﷺ, we see when he lifts his shirt up, he has 2 stones tied to his stomach from hunger. And what we see from all of the narrations is that the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba who were in poverty like Abu Bakr and Umar, that they were in this state by choice. And this is a really important lesson to understand. That it wasn't that they were just like, okay, I'm just going to worship Allah all day long, I'm not going to get any income. No. That they used whatever income that they got for the sake of the deen. They immediately gave it away to those who were needy, to support the Muslims, to fund the Muslim armies, right? And so they put themselves in a position, what? In a position to do good. In a position to be able to support others. Not in a position where they needed to be supported by others. And so when you see the narrations of like the Sahaba going hungry, or the Prophet ﷺ going hungry, it's not because they were they had a lack of means, right? It's not because they weren't making any money and they were dependent on others. No, it's because they were the ones funding others, right? They were the ones providing for everybody else. And so it's really important for us to understand that being successful is a good thing, but that success should be with the intent for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether it's to provide for my family, which you get reward for, or it's to, and it should be, I guess, to support the Muslims at large, right? That we shouldn't be between two extremes. That one extreme that, I don't need to make any money and I'm just going to live in a very, in a very humble state, things like that. True humility is when you have something to brag about, right? True humility is when you actually have tons of money, but you're not using any of it and you're giving it away, and that's why you're living in maybe a small apartment or something like that, right? With the Prophet ﷺ, we see that he lived very simply. He didn't. He went hungry many days, and that was true humility. Why? Because he had the option to not live like that, but he did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's what it truly means to live humbly, right? That you're making money, but you're using it for the sake of good. And so you're spending less on yourself and more on others. And the other extreme, where somebody they'll make so much money and they'll chase success so much, but they'll forget that this success needs to be given towards the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, towards the sake of the deen, right? And so finding that middle balance of being really successful and strong members of society, and using that strength for the sake of the deen, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that when Allah asks us in the hereafter that you were given position and wealth and education, what did you do with it? You can say, Ya Allah, I used all of these tools you gave me for your sake. And this is inshallah the kind of people that we want to be. Barakallahu feekum for tuning in. Mukhlis, you asked me for a shout out. This is your shout out. Assalamu alaikum Mukhlis. Jazakumullah khair everybody for joining. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.